We will begin our presentation, and I'll start by introducing myself. Ko Robin Bigelow, tuku ingoa. Tauiwi Ngāti Pākehā, Tangati Treaty, Te Whenua Pāpātua Nuku. So, Mike?
Kia ora koutou, ko Michael Ellis tōku ingoa. Ko Aponiki here. I've been up in Whangarei for 5 years working alongside Weed Action Native Habitat Restoration Trust, and thank you very much for the opportunity for us to present tonight.
Kia ora, I don't yet have my pepeha down, but I'm Kate Hardcastle. I'm the Community Engagement Coordinator for Weed Action, and really about linking together all of our landowners and volunteers to all the great work that our teams are doing.
So we're each going to share a different aspect of the work, but to understand, and the specific thing we were asked to talk about was how we work with communities, agencies, and groups, councils across our area. And to do that, to understand that, we have how we've built our relationships. We need to go back to our roots to talk about our history and the evolution of those relationships. So we began in 2014 from a community meeting that 30 people attended who were really worried about the invasive weeds taking over the area. And they wanted action. They were really wanting to do something to make a difference. And so, as you see in this photograph here, we started in a little reserve called Tamaturo, which is a beach reserve, beautiful little reserve, but it was so weed burdened with jasmine and morning glory. And 23 people turned up to that event. And the picture below is 10 years hence, and it's a beautiful restored reserve with a small group that meets weekly, and they just plug away. So that began the beginning of our Weed Action groups, and is also part of that founding couple of years. We were umbrellaed by the Whangarei Heads Land Care Forum, which is a land care group that works across the Whangarei Heads area. So what happened next was a big boom for our group. The Northern Regional Council approached us, and they had some funding from what was then called the targeted rate, and Whangarei Heads was, I believe, the pilot for that throughout New Zealand. And they asked us if we would share that funding with Backyard Kiwi, an already very established group out here. And so that Northland Regional Council approach and the building of that relationship has seen us 10 years hence, moving from that initial $14,000 to $76,000 that we receive each year. And the Northern Regional Council funding is our core funding, and that map there shows you the HVA, or the high value area of the Whangarei Heads. That is what we're funded to work across that 10,000 hectares. So then in 2019 to 2020, there was a really big leap for us as an organisation. At that stage, we had 5 Weed Action volunteer groups working, and the volunteer groups became sort of a proven means that we could engage with the community, and alongside helping grow awareness and educating the community, and having a sense that something was really happening out here from really very little happening. And in that year, we also began the Parua Bay Privet Buffer, which was funded by the Northern Regional Council under what they call a Community Pest Control Agreement. Once again, a first. Usually those CPCAs are for animal pests. So we were the first weed one that we know of, that certainly NRC had funded. And that project, that Parua Bay Privet Buffer, engaged 45 landowners on fairly large properties. And yeah, 5 years hence, we've had an amazing turnaround from an ecology that was highly burdened with privet to most of the large seeding privets now gone. And that's been coordinated by Jan Marshall, who you can see there on the right in the orange. scrabbling as she does around in the bush, finding privet. And at this stage also in 2019, Mike Ehrlich, my friend here, joined the team, and he began to really inspire us about thinking about how we could deliver our program at a landscape level across the whole peninsula, and that was a big stretch. And during this time, Mike and the Trust also began to engage with local hapu groups, which was, a great step to be taking and challenging. But we also began to realize at this time that if we were to really grow and work across the landscape, we needed to access more realistic funding. So I'm going to pass it over to Kate now, who's going to talk to you about our current situation.
So now in 2024, the team hasn't necessarily grown hugely since those days. We still run pretty lean. So we're lucky to have 7 trust board members and 3 contractors, being myself, Mike and Jan. And between the 3 of us, we still don't equal 1 full-time equivalent. So we really do quite a lot on a small amount. So the becoming a charitable trust was in 2020, and that became the Weed Action Native Habitat Restoration Trust, which is a bit of a mouthful. We shorten it to the acronym WANHRT. You can make of that what you will. And yeah, really to get people to think about the fact that it's not just about the weeds, it's about restoring native habitats. And so yeah, back to the 1 full-time equivalent worker, we managed to achieve so much more through the significant funding we can get being a trust, for Mike and Aki Tahiri and other contractors to carry out hundreds of hours of weed work. I think Robin would be best to say that it has been challenging becoming a trust, the complexities and everything that it's gone with that, but it also means that we can access funding from groups like DOC, Lotteries Environment, Foundation North, World Wildlife Fund and others. So now handing over to Mike to talk about engaging with tangata whenua and how we began that journey.
Yeah, so I think how this all started was one of the key things was a funding stream that Robin obtained, which was my first role when I came here, which is a community engagement and volunteer coordinator. And that was all about trying to create more groups out in the field. And as part of that same application for funding, there was a committed amount of money to engage with tangata whenua. And I think that was a really crucial point that enabled us not only to talk to kaumata who tend to be old and possibly retired, but getting some younger people in here and actually rewarding them for their time. And I think that's a really important thing a message for you to take away. If you're all sitting around at a meeting, a hui, and everyone's, you've got people that are engaged, if they're the only one in the room that's not, then that's not fair. Yeah, so getting a paid, and that really sustained one of the key people that was part of this team, Te Nui Parata, who's standing next to me by that beautiful pūrere in one of our reserves. And so that was kind of the beginning of the partnership on the ground. It's been a real challenge for us, as pretty much you can see from the photo, Pākehā-based organisation. But it's been really important. That's been driven by Robin and the Trust, and Kate and I aspire to the same values, to work alongside and try and be true partners with our treaty partners. So we managed, the timing was pretty good. In about 2020, there was the Walding Conifer program, and that was basically, you probably all know about it, with COVID coming along, there was a lot of worker displacement. Places like Queenstown were shutting down, so the government, quite cleverly, I think, put together a whole lot of funding to engage those people that are losing their jobs into doing Walding Conifer control. Which meant that people that were flipping burgers one day in Queenstown were up in a helicopter chopping pines down. It's probably just a perfect adventure for them. And so that program extrapolated to Northland. And if you go back, we won't go back to the map, but we have Walding pine issues here, probably not the same level as the South Island, but definitely was an issue. So that funding enabled some contract work and some training. It was a single species to get the local, some uri or people from the local tribe out there doing the control work and teaching the control and techniques. That has kind of rolled out and become, which I'll move on to shortly, is coming on to a lot more complex sites, a lot more species. The team, of which 2 of those 3 are still working with us, and there's now 8 of them, they now know it can identify and control between 50 and 60 environmental weeds. So they're pretty highly skilled. And I think, is that me for now? You want to talk about this?
Oh, yeah, well, I could say that. If you
Okay,
like.
yeah.
Yeah, I guess one of the benefits of attracting more funding through becoming a charitable trust is that we're now getting funding from DOC, Lotteries Environment Grants Board, World Wildlife Fund, Foundation North, and we've worked on some very significant sites. You can see on that map there, sites like Riatahi Reserve, Manaia, Public Conservation Land, Pakikaukutu, and Pukinamu. Yeah.
So we thought we'd note here that we always carry and look towards this overarching principle. So we also have a vision, but this is our overarching principle for our programs, is to work with tangata whenua and develop our tangata tiriti partnership by upholding the principles of Te Tiriti o Waitangi and to promote habitat restoration mahi to support hapu iwi links back to their ancestral lands. I will add that when we were asked to do this talk and everything, we had no idea about the events that were going to be going on this week, so it does feel quite nicely timely.
Yeah.
So yeah, how do we actually operate on the ground? When I started, we had 5 programs, and we've sort of condensed and clarified to 3. And it's really about how we wrap around a landscape. So with all the huge projects that we do and the significant funding, this is an example using Riatahi Maunga, which I'm lucky enough to live underneath. So the green shading is the areas that Mike and Aki Tahiri are currently finishing up their 2nd full sweep for all invasive weed species. So this is a 60-hectare maunga, and it's all under Whangarei District Council Reserve. And we've sort of identified it as a great flagship or test case. It's doable. So yeah, so the green is the contractor work. The blue is our volunteer groups. So some of our amazing local residents who give up their time to go and work in the reserves. And they're not small in themselves. So the coastal walkway at the coastal part of that is probably about 6 to 8 specific sites that they need to check every year, some needing more and some needing less. And then also on the sort of northern western part of that is another reserve, Darch Point, and that links back to Riatahi. So it's really important that we're also taking care of those surrounding areas strategically. And then the last, well, I've gone backwards, but anyway, the yellow is the community. So landowners living right up against these beautiful reserves, making sure that they're aware that what's in their garden can, you know, obviously populate into the reserve, and potentially, hopefully, one day making them happy with their own property, helping them out so that they will become our next volunteers. And then it's you talking about our results.
Yeah, so this is slides just, this is the current phase. It needs a little bit of updating, but that just shows you the track logging. So obviously the key thing is that some of the iconic forests have been protected. You know, once you've done your initial control, swept for all the key high impact environmental weeds and followed up, and we're already seeing the native seed bank just erupting where it was solid ginger and queen of the night, etc. So that's one of the big goals that we have. And the adjoining landowners community are buying in. Sometimes Kate's got an initiative of an hour of power, so she will go and help a landowner. Doesn't have to be adjoining, but you can do work together and make things happen. So it's important to have a clear buffer. And collaborations has really been the big thing we've been able to do, and that's been really useful to draw other agencies in. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a minute. The other benefits is the agency. So this 60 hectare, quite steep mountain that goes from sea level to about 260 metres in a short area. The local council have provided small tranches of funding, but with the recent economic crisis, that's been withdrawn. We've got funding from lotteries. But there's a huge benefit for them when people are talking about their reserve. Obviously, it's not a weed pit anymore. It's flourishing. You can get that sense when you're in it. And going back to our partnership with Tangata Whenua, there's work for local people. So that not only keeps them local, it gets them reconnecting with nature. For some of them, it's sort of the first time. But it's really important, and learning all the different, not just the weed species, about the ecology and the native species as well. So we kind of, Kate mentioned it, we've proven that concept of just by doing substantial weed control in a systematic way, working in lines of control, keying in with your GPS points, we're able to achieve, we believe, a high level of success. Probably one of the things that really is building the capacity. So we have local capacity too, where there's 8 people in this group, and they're also doing pest animal work. They managed to tee in with the predator-free control group, the group called Ake Taihere we work with. So that's really important, that this group is actually a standalone entity now doing their own private contracts. But that capacity of having trained people being able to do these large areas, that's the one of the key ingredients for making it happen, is having those local people that know what to do and know their species. And I think we can pass on to you, Robert.
Yeah, cool. So you asked us to talk about our relationships, and so we're just really going to focus on that for a little while. And when we thought about it, really we do relationships at 3 levels, and I don't mean to be prescriptive, but it's a helpful way to look at it, actually. So at a governance level, I'll speak to that, and then Mike will speak to the operational level, and Kate will speak to the community level of engagement. So at a governance level, as we said, we've developed relationships with Whangarei District Council, Northland Regional Council, DOC, our local conservation partners, our funders, and some of the 12 hapu iwi tribes that connect back to this significant area for them. We have developed memorandums of understanding with Whangarei District Council, Northland Regional Council, and more recently Bream Head Conservation Trust. And MOUs are a very valuable way of actually identifying the relationship and what the responsibilities are in the partnership. We're currently negotiating a further 5-year community agreement with DOC, and that is quite a bit of work for us, mainly because the new community agreements are really paying respect to engagement with treaty principles and treaty requirements. And so from now on, part of what Weed Action will be doing will be ensuring that we have relationships with all 12 of those different hapu iwi groups, and that when we develop a work plan, that we liaise with Tangata Whenua about those work plans and ask for their input, ask if they want to be involved, and also if we have money to contract out, that third-party contracting, that they have the opportunity to participate in bidding for those contracts. So I think the other really significant new thing that's been happening for us recently is the development of what we call a mana enhancing relationship. And we're just developing one at the current moment with Ake Taihere. So, we've been working with Ake Taihere now for 6 years, and to really work at that relationship, the mana enhancing relationship is about the relationship. It's about building a trusting, meaningful relationship. And so we're also going to be looking at doing something similar with Te Wairiki Trust. And our relationships with other Tangata Whenua groups, while they're more informal, we will be moving in that direction, hopefully. So while it's a big process, it really aligns with our values. Yeah. So I've just put in here that as part of building relationships with local hapu groups, it's really helped us reach out and work with other hapu iwi groups on their whenua Māori. So that includes Ngāti Karora at Patawa and Ngāti Pukenga at Pakikaikutu. And we're, forging relationships and hope to do so with Ngāti Tū at Solomon's Point. So I'll pass it over to Mike to talk about our operations side of communication and developing relationship.
Yeah, so this slide's from Mahitahi at Manaia. So this is as part of the Manaia maunga. It's about 350 hectares. It was in DOF's one of the top 500 NIM sites, National Heritage Management System sites. So very high value, some incredible remnants. The bottom end of it, though, where you can see the pines in the background, is highly degraded. It's just a sea of about 7 or 8 nasty weeds, moth plant, Aleagnus, wild ginger, banana passion fruit. Thank you. Just chime in. The pines are not really the problem, and it's a big area. It's about 17 hectares. So we had a mahitahi a couple of years ago, and we managed to pull one together. And it's a huge operation. It's logistically challenging. But most of the hivers people on the left-hand side of that photograph are Akitai Here. And so they were leaders. So that was building their capacity in working in kind of pods. And we divvied up with certain tracks that we cut. There's different areas where the different groups could work. And we pulled in, it was WDC, local council owned land, but we pulled in dock staff, we pulled in Kodi Ora staff, so they're also from the Ngāti Wai tribe, which are connected with the Akitai Here crew. We pulled in our volunteer groups, we invited them. Help me out, who else? The tribe from across the harbour, Patu Harakiki, came and helped out.
Predator free.
Predator free, yes.
Kiwi. Yeah.
Backyard Kiwis, the people involved in pest animal work came as part of this really broad collaboration. And I think there's a lot of power in that. Power and unity. It became a story. It raised the profile of the weeds and the issues that we have. So I think we also had Kiwi2 attend. We worked quite closely with them as well. The locally trained Uri of Hapu group have done contract work for them as well. So I think that helps our general thing of raising the awareness in the community. And trying to get those councillors out there and getting their hands a bit dirty too. I think that's always a good thing. See what, definitely getting in amongst the weeds is all about. We all know the people here in this chat. I imagine most of, if not all of you, have done weed control. Some of it's not glamour work, but it needs to be done. So it's really good I think, for managers, even though some might turn up in shiny shoes, to get out there and actually do some weed control and see what we're faced with on a day-to-day basis. Yeah, definitely. So just to end that, it's power and unity, and we'll work with anyone pretty much in trying to do it.
Can I add one point here? I think one of the big achievements in the Mahitahi events, and we've run a few, is the bringing together of hapu with our usual conservation groups and with our volunteers, so that there's that great sharing of Te Ao Māori, Mataranga Māori, and science-based conservation. So it's a really significant thing to be doing. Okay, awesome. Thank you.
So I'm talking about the working with community level of our relationships. So this isn't dealing with a single entity as such. It's obviously our wider Whangarei Heads Parua Bay community, and all the different groups and wants and needs and motivations within that. So we have, quite a lot of work we got put into awareness, I guess, keeping our name and face out there. That's with things like roadside signs. Most of our Facebook posts would be cross-posted to the community pages, so that people just see us constantly, and local newsletter articles, just keeping any story that we think will grab the average Joe out there. I think it's important to note, and you've seen it a bit in the photos, obviously, and through the groups we've mentioned, that the wider community is already fairly engaged in this space. We have a lot of other successful groups that have been operating for a while, like Backyard Kiwi, Breamhead Te Whara Conservation Trust. And so there is already that high level of engagement. And also that, yeah, our special places are quite visible. You know, they're towering maunga above us. And so people all realise the spiritual, cultural and ecological significance of these places. So yeah, keeping on with the nuts and bolts, the top part of the slide sort of shows you some of the inputs that our teams have done over the last financial year up till end of June. So nearly 2,500 volunteer hours working on reserves. That's across our 6 groups. Where was it? The amount of different outreach events we've done. So 3 workshops. That's with our volunteer groups and others. With taking the trailer, so we have a nifty little trailer, which I didn't put a photo of anywhere, that we take out to the community, take out to market days, and that gets us in front of people in a way that, being a weeding event that people may or may not go to, it achieves something different, and it gets people who might never contact us for help, but they see us come and have a chat, and it's a really nice way of sort of breaking down those barriers. Our more engaged people on the database receive our monthly e-newsletter, thanks to EcoNet for the customer relationship manager tool, which has been a really cool way of getting our story out on a monthly basis, everything that we're doing. We're also producing our quarterly reports, which we do try and share pretty regularly. We're also, as well as talking about weeds and how to control them and techniques and what to look for, we're trying to tell bigger stories about ecosystems and biodiversity and, you know, how we're all linked together. Whether we're successful in that or not, I don't know. It's quite a big story to tell. And I think, you know, the photos you might have seen, and conversely to what Mike said about glamour work, we do try and show that the work we're doing can be an enjoyable experience. You're out in nature, hopefully on a sunny or nice day. We're pretty lucky that a lot of our photos have a cityscape backdrop as well. So yeah, basically, yeah, we're trying to trick people into joining us a little bit. But yeah, that it is what we know, it can be a really pleasurable experience to help nature while you know, getting outside. Yeah, yeah, and good morning teas. And then the other part of our community engagement is also reporting back to the community on these big projects that we are doing, which is, yeah, it can be a bit of a complicated story to tell, and we don't want to risk people thinking that Weed Action will just take care of all the weeds in the area, and that they are part of the solution as well. So yeah. And this is, oh, what's this on there? I went back too far. Hang on.
So we're just coming to the end of our presentation now, and I just wanted to conclude, to say where we're at the moment in our thinking and what's happening for Weed Action. So, you know, we're at an age of 10 years now, and what we're needing to look at is developing our sustainability and consolidating our focus, because it can be quite daunting working across such a large area. So as you can tell, we're absolutely passionate about native habitat restoration, and we're holding that alongside our priority to support mana whenua to be the conservation experts on these lands that are so significant to them. So, you know, to achieve this, it's quite a balance, and we're currently exploring how we hold both the tension of those burgeoning weeds and maintaining the work that we've done in habitat restoration, while also, you know, stepping back and making space for hapu-led conservation work to grow. And I think being redundant on these large reserves and public conservation lands is an aim. And yeah, we've got plenty of work to do. So yes, thank you for this time and for us having the opportunity to share our work.
Thank you so much. That was really inspiring. The work you're doing is amazing, and I'll open up to questions. So if you could either put your question in the chat or put your hand up, which is, if you look across the top or the bottom of your screen, you'll see a hand, and you click that, and once you finish your question, make sure you unclick it. But just what I wanted to say is, I picked up a couple of little terms. The power hour, that sounded like a really good term. Do you want to tell us just quickly about what you think about that?
The hour of power, isn't it?
Yeah, the hour of power. Yeah.
Hour of power.
So I guess, yeah, what I find, I'm the the incoming emails and Facebook and all of those things. And people ask, what can I do about this on my property? What can I do about that? And our response has always been, this is what you can do. Here are some tips and techniques. And if needed, we do give out free herbicides to the community with obviously training and safe storage and all that sort of stuff. And they're very small amounts. But I was starting to feel like maybe it would be good to actually go and help people a little bit. And it doesn't solve their problems necessarily, but it gives them a bit of a boost that they're not alone. And it means I actually get to see what's happening there. People might not even know that they've got something else happening, or they might need a hand with just, how do I start? Where do I go? And we also offer more full-scale weed management plans where Mike would go and actually assess the property. But for that, we do have a gatekeeping system, I guess, where it needs to be somewhere that they've got some good native habitat value. Whereas I'll go to, Joe Bloggs in their residential area, and that's fine. So yeah.
We also give out gels. We've recently had Cut and Paste kindly donate. How much was it?
Sponsor us, yeah.
Yeah, we're doing our moth plant initiatives, so that's quite good. Typically, we hand out neat herbicides, so glyphosate, sometimes triclopyr, metron, etc. Yes, part of our work.
That sounds amazing. I see that Martina has got her hand up. If you could ask your question, don't forget to unmute yourself.
I was just wondering how you safely do that. How much instructions do you give? If I do a liter container of glyphosate, for example, I try to put the manual on it and all the rest of it. Metsulfuron I find easy because it's a sort of 5-gram sachets with all the info. But so how do you deal with that? Do you give them a sheet with written instructions, or?
We have kind of two forms that we have with that. So one is our own tracking that they've been given X amount, so that we can, have a good record of where herbicide has gone. And it also lists everything that we need to check with them about having safe storage, that they know how to handle it, how to mix it, all those sorts of things. We also do give people the opportunity to return the empties to us, so that there's correct disposal going on. And something I did develop partly for myself as the person giving this out and wanting to make sure that I cover everything, is a sheet with the ratios of how they should be mixing it, the PPE, everything that they should be doing. And that's all just written there for them, so they can put that up in their garage or their shed or wherever they do it. Because I think like any of us, you get verbal instructions and you forget half of it. If it's in an email, then you're not going to see it where you are. So sometimes printed is still good. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you.
Oh yeah, and obviously everything is labelled. Sorry, someone just wanted me. We put our own little labels on each item. So we also don't. We would probably give maybe 500 mils of glyphosate in a time, and rather encourage return visits. Yeah.
Brilliant, thank you. Annette, you had a question.
Yes, hi, and hello, sister. Hi. It was fantastic work, very inspiring indeed, from all of you. I'm just curious, our local board, our council local board has just, the last few months, released its pest management plan, and we get a lot of our funding from our local board, and they are not aiming for complete eradication. I just wondered if you have goals around that, they have sort of 4 areas of terminology with their goals with pest weeds, and one's eradication, one's progressive containment, and one's sustained control, and then zero density, which I'm not quite sure what that is. So I just wondered if your governing bodies or local councils or DOC have any such similar grading of the intensity of eradication or otherwise.
Yes, so I mean, every council should be putting a RPMP, a Regional Pest Management Plan together, which many of you be familiar, and they categorise them similarly. Sometimes they have different. Zero density or eradication. We're kind of beginning to operate a bit like a council. We've got our site led, so we'll try and do everything that's having impact, and then we do targeting, like the moth plant. We're trying to suppress it, so it's not zero density. That's a suppression or containment. Well, containment would be like tree privet when we did that 5-year program, is to try to contain it to a certain area.
Yeah.
So we kind of are quite fluid. Things like Madeira vine, which we've identified about 15 sites, we'll try and head towards zero density where it's possible. But things that are widespread, it's just not possible to do that.
Yeah.
The councils do operate in our area. I think they've got about 10 or a dozen eradication species. So we'll inform them when we come across them, so they'll come and control them. Things like Mila minute, wild kiwi fruit's another one, Peltonia. There's a few species they deal with like that. Our batwing passion flower as well. So yeah, but typically our main focus, well, we've got our 3 programs, but in the habitat restoration, we're not really working to a list. If something has, a moderate to high or extreme ecological impact, we'll be targeting it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you for that. And so the council will deal with them on public land? No. So what are the council dealing with then? Because that's often the issue, isn't it?
Well, it is, and every council is different. I know from Wellington, the council there own massive bits of conservation estate, and they have their own weed teams. In Northland, it's not the case. There's not much. There's very little public ownership by Northland Regional Council, and typically when you've got a smaller council, often in a less developed area, they actually have some pretty decent pockets of biodiversity, like that Rio Tahi mountain that you might have seen in the presentation.
Yeah.
But they have very little resource apart from clearing out tracks, etc. So sometimes Robin and has been able to attain one-off or a couple of years funding, but typically they don't have resourcing to manage those weeds within their reserves, and I'm sure many of you find that
Absolutely.
that's the case.
Yeah.
They don't have biodiversity staff in the smaller councils. Whereas a regional council do have the staffing, but often they don't have the reserves. So it's kind of complex, and every region is different. We do secure quite a bit of funding. We've gone for funding from the Department of Conservation, but also Foundation North, which is a philanthropic organisation who wants to empower tangata whenua as well. So we put cases to everybody pretty much. The local council was probably the most strapped for funding, and really I think they adhere to the regional plan, but it's typically just roadways where they'll do things that are targeted. They're not going into the steep and deep country that they own. So it's kind of a legacy thing.
Yeah, I think Auckland Council's pretty similar. They can't afford to be doing all their reserves, so they just do 1 or 2 meters from the walkway or something, and that's about it.
Great, thanks for that. There's a question on the chat. I assume not every nearby landowner is interested or helpful. Do you get some who are actively opposed, hard to handle, and what do you do, if anything?
Oh, the 2%ers. Yeah, I think you just work with the willing as our kind of our mantra. We can go elsewhere. There's plenty of other areas. But most people, I wouldn't say many people are opposed. Probably ambivalence, probably a better thing. But Kate probably has more connect.
Or unable, or it's a funny thing. I've said this to quite a few people when they come to talk to me about weeds. That the number one thing I hear complaints about, it's not any particular weed, it's the word neighbour. My neighbour's got this, my neighbour's got that, and it's tough. Like all over the place, we have sites that we call the Badlands that we're not ready to tackle yet because they're just too big, and that's on public land, and it's probably the same for some privately owned land, and they're very visible. We don't actively go to contact those people. We're not we're just not resourced yet to try and to do that. And as Mike said, work with the willing. It sort of ties back to another thing that we think about is when we're working in native bush, you know, protect the best, keep that good. And so I guess you could apply that to the properties as well. People that are already tackling it and doing well, we want to support them and get their place really good. Then the next level would be people that are starting to get involved, and we can really help them with doing it correctly, being efficient. The really bad places, yeah, at the moment we're not trying to tackle that, I guess. Yeah, it's a tricky one. Yeah.
And some of the sorry, I guess perverse outcome from subdivision is that you know, more historic ones end up with massive parcels of land, sometimes in very good forest, and sometimes highly invaded with weeds as well. And sometimes they're connected with the larger forest. So it's not really, it doesn't seem to be much of a concern for some people that own those areas. In the past, we have been able to leverage some funding from the regional council in a biofund project. So that was a work in kind. If the landowner had skin in the game, like if they could show that they did X amount of hours or they engaged a contractor, and that was up to $5,000, it was quite significant, then the regional council would match it. So that was quite a good scheme as well.
That's gone now, hasn't it?
Yeah, I know it's still there, but it's
Very
again, it's one of those other things that's been sort of dialed down. Yeah.
Another question is, how much attendance do you get from the public at your workshops, and how many readers of your newsletters?
Good question. So, well, the newsletters go out to about 450 people, and some have had pretty good open and read rates. Yeah, so it's always, you know, you're sort of shooting it out into the dark and you get a few responses sometimes, but it is about keeping that awareness out there. In terms of attendance at the workshops, when we've invited specific groups and people, I think, you know, most of them would come, wouldn't they? 20?
Yeah, maybe about 20 here at the workshops.
Yeah.
Brilliant. There's just a comment from Andy from Cut and Paste saying that if you've got a community events like that Robin's arranged, that they will look at sponsoring and how they can help and give discounts to community groups. So everyone take note of that.
Yeah,
your secret's out.
So thank you, Andy.
Yeah.
We really appreciate your generosity, and it's a great product as well.
Yeah.
I really feel strongly about our volunteers using cut and paste rather than sprays. You know, like it's a very safe product to be using. Different story for contractors and so on, but yeah, it's a great product. Thank you.
One of the groups we didn't mention, so it's a bit of a thing off to the side, but is our SWAT team. So we have most of them are pretty seasoned, but experienced, and they're good with the drills for drilling full of trees. They know a lot about the different weeds and that, so they're kind of like a specialist team, and we'll take them to sites where we can't get funding for, which are important to do, little ecological stepping stones, perhaps little reserves that if they're done well will provide a reservoir for native plants, and also if you do pest animal control, you know, for those things to spread from. Oh, SWAT, yeah, special. Geez, I think you're still deciding. Serious weed action team, strategic weed action team. So they really enjoy that.
They're all volunteers.
They're all volunteers. That once a month they get a shirt, and they've got the, you know, the pouch and the you know, the silky scabbard saw, so your hands free, which makes things a lot safer. So they're going to some pretty gnarly terrain. So it's quite a good, another resource that we can tap into, as well as our reserve dedicated groups.
I think that's a good point. Having a kit for volunteers is really rewarding and encouraging for them.
Especially the ones that are committed, you know. So we'll have 10, 11 working bees a year. Most of them will attend if they can. And we'll get about, you know, 7 or 8 people most times.
Have they done their grow safe training?
No, they don't. I would say one or two.
Yeah.
A few would have done them because they're part of other groups, but it's not a requirement for them to do it.
Yep.
And Nigel, you had your hand up earlier. Do you still have a question?
It was partly answered. It was really whether you get other organisations like, I don't know, regional council or DOT coming into your area and doing control without you knowing. Like we sort of get that quite, you know, we're not completely aligned with the council. So we might do stuff they don't know about. They might do stuff we don't know about. Or is it kind of more joined up? Everyone, you sort of get good visibility.
Well, I think with the community agreements that Robin mentioned before, so we kind of give the areas where we're working, and with things being so resource stretched with Department of Conservation, they're not going out there doing contracting work. So they pulled the only weed contract they had on that Mania Mountain, that beautiful mountain, a couple of years ago, that it dropped out of the top 500 sites. So yeah, there's not much risk.
Yeah. I could add something here too. Each year with our volunteer groups and the reserves we work on, we develop Mike's developed an overall ecological work plan for the reserve. And then each year we do a review of the work done, and that gets sent into Whangarei District Council and attached to our MOU, so that they know what our work plan is for the year coming and what we've achieved at the end of that year.
That sounds brilliant. So another question is, what effect on native wildlife have you experienced? I'm assuming good effect.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you're restoring the habitat. Kiwi hate ginger, wild ginger, and Elaeagnus is a dead zone underneath. It's got that phenolic compound or allelopathic effect that pretty much toxifies the soil. So no habitat, no native plants, not the right native plants and animals, that whole food web's broken down. So you've got to have pest animal control to notice the wildlife really coming back. But of course, if you've got a flourishing, healthy, fully multi-layered forest of native plants, it's going to be much better habitat for native or native biota.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. So we're coming to the end of our chat. Again, a lot of the comments about how inspirational you guys are and what an amazing job you're doing. So there's a lot of that kind of chatter in the chat. So thank you so much for presenting. I find these events are really important, just as for volunteers like myself to really motivate and get ideas and take our own projects to the next level. But I'm sure a lot of people have got a lot out of this. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Tabitha, did Martina have a question?
Martina, you've asked your question, haven't you?
Can I just add one final comment, if that's okay? I think for us, the key to the success is being able to work alongside. If you can get people to work alongside, people from the local hapu that are interested, and really build that trust relationship and build that capacity and get them meaningful work, because there's many of them that want to work in this space. I think it can be it's been a game changer for us, I think, to have that relationship. We're still building it. We're not there yet. But I think it's really honouring those treaty principles as well, to give them the opportunity to help train them up and share our expertise.
That's an interesting point to finish on today with the coin.